My name is Phil Golding, and this is 5 Steps to Freedom. This episode, entitled The Heart of Mindfulness, is based on my 5-step process for healing your mind, self-awareness and empowerment, and my self-help book, 5 Steps to Freedom, a path to inner harmony and personal growth. To get an overview of my 5-step process, which is the basis of my work as a psychotherapist and self-awareness, meditation, mindfulness teacher, go to my podcasts, The 5-Step Process for Healing, Wisdom and Empowerment, Parts 1 and 2, which I have produced for this purpose. In this podcast, I am going to introduce you to the practice of mindfulness, which is central to developing self-awareness, emotional healing, and self-empowerment. A basic definition of mindfulness is being the non-judging, non-reacting observer of your mind, as well as the world around you. This is so important because as this calm, open observer, you are in the driver's seat of your mind and connected to your ultimate potential. Being this detached observer may sound simple, but it is surprisingly hard to do, which is why so many people give up. We will explore why it is so hard, but also how to actually achieve this important goal of consciousness. It can be done, but you have to commit to the process to succeed. To succeed, there is no giving up, just ongoing learning and growing. Your life is in your hands. I will show you how to gain mastery over your life in this podcast and as I am doing in all my other podcasts. But it depends on your never give up commitment and willingness to learn. Your potential is waiting for you to start connecting to it and becoming it. This is a long podcast. It is designed to study and transform yourself with. It is not for entertainment. So if you want to heal, evolve and gain mastery over your life, then get on board with me and let's make it happen. To help you get started on your mindfulness practice, let's make listening to this podcast a mindfulness exercise in itself. To begin with, set a strong intention to listen very carefully to this podcast while being open and relaxed and flow with what is being said. Also, at the same time, be very aware of your breath and deliberately slow your breathing down and deepen it. Maintain this deep, slow breathing while you listen to this podcast. This will help you stay focused and present in the moment and will enable you to take in more of what I am saying. Whenever your mind distracts you, remember to breathe deep and slow again and refocus. It does not matter how many times your mind distracts you. It is not a test. The important thing is to use your intention and your deeper, slower breath to be more aware of when you are distracted and therefore experience being able to bring yourself back to focus more easily. I will talk more about why this type of breathing is so important for mindfulness as the podcast progresses. You will also experience how easy it is to forget to breathe in this way if it is not already a habit. So I will remind you throughout the podcast. So let's get started. The term mindfulness basically means a mind that is full of awareness. We are aware of and in touch with what is going on in our minds. Considering that we live our lives through our minds, which colour our perceptions and determine our beliefs, and therefore our experience of the world, being aware of and in charge of our minds would be vitally important. However, central to the dilemma of being human, we tend to have little awareness of what our mind is about, and as a result, we all too often find being in control of our confusion, our suffering, and therefore our lives is a struggle. To say that we can be aware of our minds implies that awareness is something different to the mind. In other words, if you can observe your mind, it stands to reason that you, as the aware observer, are more than your mind. Awareness, therefore, is something that can transcend the mind and witness it from a higher perspective. This ability to observe your own mind then gives you the ability to self-reflect, like you are sitting opposite your mind at a cafe, sharing a cup of tea or coffee while getting to know your mind from the perspective of being your mind's friend, manager or parent. Getting to know your mind then puts you in the position of being able to act on your mind and consciously, deliberately change the way your mind operates, like a manager directing a work team or a parent mentoring their child. You can therefore be in charge of your mind. All too often, though, instead of being able to observe our minds and manage our minds, we are instead lost in our minds and literally being our minds. So what is the problem with just being our minds? Why is it so important to be able to observe and act on our minds from a conscious awareness standpoint? To begin with, to answer this question, it would help to understand the difference between the mind and awareness. So first up, let's define the mind. When you look into your mind, you are looking into your past. You are looking at your memories and your conditioning. You are basically looking at the hard drive of a computer. The mind is a recording mechanism, and therefore it is your long-term memory, where you store your habits and beliefs, along with the recording of your lifelong experiences, like one long movie that you star in, a movie that you can literally enter into at any point in time and relive it in profound ways, at will or often beyond your control, whether you want to experience that memory or not. Being recorded and habitual means the mind is not very flexible. It is stuck in its ways, in other words. Long-term memory becomes long-term because of the physical synaptic pathways that are laid down in your brain. These synaptic pathways become so substantial they make up the bulk of your brain's mass. On the other hand, you as awareness, who is looking into your mind, is looking into the mind from the standpoint of now, and always now. Unlike the mind, awareness always exists in the now. Being in the ongoing now position means awareness is in touch with any new experience. It is constantly open to new information. Awareness operates on short-term memory and is always flexible and adaptable. Being in the now position, with access to all that is happening now, places awareness in the perfect position to be the manager of the mind that, by its habitual nature, struggles to be flexible and therefore adapt to the moment. When we are going to school, for example, it is you as awareness who is being taught. It is up to you then to teach your mind what you are learning with study, with repetition, etc., so that you can record the information and therefore retain it. Yes, we are recording the information in our brain, but there is more going on than the brain and a basic computer hard drive. A human mind encapsulates the brain and body and has its own consciousness geared to survival, which I will talk about more as we go. This mind or human consciousness can be called the ego. It is our potential of consciousness that is not yet awake. It is captured by the mind. It is identifying with the mind and serving the mind's conditioning, memories and beliefs, etc. It is ego that is awakening into awareness and learning to be the observer of the mind and not just being the mind. The mind, with its long-term memory, therefore is meant to be the support person to awareness, like a computer is to the computer operator, programmed in a way that enables awareness to manage your life efficiently in the now. For example, as awareness, you don't want to have to learn how to walk, talk, read and write and drive a car every day before you head out the door in the morning to go to work. You give that job to your mind and its recorded programming, but not totally. Mind and awareness work as a team. Let's use driving a car as an example. An experienced driver is relaxed while driving the car because most of what the driver needs to do is predictable and habitual, which can be taken care of by the mind. However, when something unexpected happens, such as a pedestrian suddenly stepping onto the road as you are approaching, awareness springs into action, accesses more optional programs that the mind stores and uses those to slam on the brakes if there is time or swerve the car out of the way if you can. Not only that, awareness can learn something new from the experience. This is why it is so hard to program a car to drive itself, because how do you program for something so dynamic and flexible as awareness? Here is a different driving example. How often have you been intending to drive to somewhere new, and then while distracting yourself by chatting to your passenger, for example, you end up driving to work instead? During that time, you as awareness weren't driving the car, your mind was, and all it could do was revert to a recorded program, activated by the fact that you were travelling down a familiar road. You weren't being mindful of where you were going. Therefore, if you are not mindful of where you are going in life, your mind could keep leading you down roads you are better off not going down, such as the road to people-pleasing and giving your power away, the road to judging others and creating conflict, the road to judging yourself and creating depression, or the road to believing the future is always unsafe and finding yourself at the dead end of anxiety. Therefore, letting the mind be the sole driver of your life can lead you down the road to suffering. But all too often, that is what we do, which is why we need to consciously learn how to be mindful, to be the aware operator of our minds. Now don't forget that deep, slow breath. You are here now, taking in this podcast. So when it comes to observing and being in the driver's seat of our minds, where peace of mind, well-being and happiness is concerned, what we need to be focusing on the most is our emotions. Emotions are so important for mindfulness because emotion is the energetic consequence or frequency of the thought. Emotions themselves don't get confused. Where suffering is concerned, painful emotions are not the real problem, even though we tend to treat them that way and go out of our way to avoid them by suppressing them or blaming them on something or someone else. Emotions are actually the perfect vibrational representation of the thought that causes the emotion, be it positive or negative. The emotion, feeling, is the messenger telling us the nature of the thought. The thought is what gets confused and causes us pain. The emotion is simply revealing and pointing to the confused thought. This is very important to comprehend for many reasons. The quality of the emotion is equal to the quality of the thought. Think about that carefully. Thought results in emotion. Therefore, emotion reveals the nature of the thought. Here is a very important key to awareness. Emotion, feeling is now. Awareness is now. Emotion, feeling is very much the inner eye of awareness, giving awareness the power to see into the depths of the mind. You can also differentiate emotion from feeling. You can consider that emotions come from your vulnerable human self that needs to be cared for, and feeling comes from your higher levels of consciousness, love in other words, that guide you in that caring. Awareness is in touch with both levels of your being. So seeing emotions and feelings like this is a bit difficult when using language, but conceptually it's quite useful. The real power of conscious awareness is that it represents the higher feelings of unconditional love and wisdom. Awareness is aware because our heart is open. You cannot be aware and have your heart closed. Another important key to mindfulness and self-mastery. We are learning to embrace our vulnerable humanness with our heart open. As conscious awareness, we are learning to be the love that our humanness has always been looking for. This is the holy grail of awareness. Therefore, to gain mastery over your mind, you must accept full responsibility to be the loving guardian of your mind. To take full responsibility for all that you think, therefore feel, say and do, with self-love and compassion. Otherwise you are not going to learn how to be the master. It is not about getting it right, however. It is about having a go and never stop having a go. So this learning to be the love for our own humanness, our own source of love, is perhaps the ultimate power of mindfulness. So focus just on your deep, slow breath for a moment. It is you as awareness who is choosing to breathe this way. Imagine now that every breath you take is you giving your human self, your body-mind, a big, loving hug. Imagine that your humanness is inside you as awareness, which it is. Your body-brain is within your mind, but your mind-body is within you as awareness. You are now representing a sanctuary to your human self. So from this sanctuary of your own loving awareness, keep focusing on this podcast. So let's look into why observing our minds can be so challenging. When it comes to looking into our own minds, for most of us, our painful emotions are the most difficult thing to handle, and yet our emotions are central to developing self-awareness. So here is one of our great human dilemmas. Because we learn as a vulnerable child to be afraid of our painful emotions, we therefore become blind to the needs of our own minds as we grow older. As I pointed out, the common way we seem to treat our painful emotions is to run away from them or shut them down or project them onto somebody else. We try to fix our emotions by medicating them to make them go away, a form of shutting them down. We have learned to regard painful emotions as something that we must get rid of, without realizing that emotions are just telling us what our thoughts, conscious or unconscious, are up to. Even when we do understand the link between emotions and thoughts, such as with cognitive behavior therapy, CBT, we still get too busy fixing the thoughts in order to get rid of the painful emotions, instead of really listening to our minds. Being too hasty to fix the thoughts in order to get rid of the emotions can mean therapy outcomes only reach shallow levels. So how do we listen to our minds? For one, we can pay attention to our self-talk, which is a focus of one of my previous podcasts. This is what we are doing with CBT. There is a problem here though. Many habitual thought structures operate deep in our subconscious and unconscious minds, beyond the reach of CBT. Complex traumas can occur at a young precognitive or thinking age, such as before the age of 5. When this occurs, a predominantly emotional memory is recorded and is laid down directly into our unconscious minds. Later in childhood and beyond, traumatic memories can also become suppressed or buried by our survival instincts in order to psychologically survive, due to not having the awareness or appropriate mentoring to process the experience at that time. Learning to stay present with the emotion, with self-acceptance, self-compassion, enables us to take our self-care increasingly deeper into the unconscious labyrinth of the mind, to where we can uncover and heal mental emotional confusion and woundedness. Listening to your mind, therefore, requires you to be able to totally feel your mind, no matter how painful those emotions are. Which is why I put so much focus in my Overcome Negative Self-Talk podcast on learning how to safely stay present with your emotions. While listening to the podcast just then, you may have experienced a number of related memories being triggered into your consciousness. They may have distracted you. They may have been painful even. Do your best not to make that a problem. Instead, be aware of the memories that were triggered, what they represent, and how you felt in them. Keep breathing deep and slow, and let it all pass through you while noting with interest what had occurred. Now refocus. As children, due to our lack of awareness, our powerlessness and dependency, the world around us and the people in it are largely the cause of our painful emotions. We are emotionally egocentric without the awareness of how our limited mental capacity is trying to make sense of the world. We therefore don't initially have the awareness of the link between our emotions and our own thoughts that are driving the emotions. The adults who care for the child are there to provide the necessary awareness that protects and nurtures the child. As a child, if we find ourselves alone and vulnerable, we may think that we are not loved in that moment. That is the meaning the naturally deeply dependent and vulnerable child tends to place or project onto that experience without even knowing it. The child is naturally experiencing from that egocentric perspective. As that child, for sheer survival, we need our carer as our source of love, and we think we are cut off from that love by the carer's absence, and therefore we feel acutely afraid and abandoned. If the absence of love is too frequent, if we experience abuse as well perhaps, we may grow to believe in a deep, unconscious way that we are not good enough for love, that we must be somehow defective. We will not be aware of these deeper causal thoughts, however. We will just feel the fearful, painful emotions of our mental confusion and feel and act like an outcast from society in some way. This can result in us being a rebellious teenager, for example, or disempowered and overly compliant. As children, we do not yet have the capacity to know that we are all worthy of love regardless of what happens in our lives. We do not yet have a foundation of conscious self-love, and we are not in the position to be in control of our own minds and therefore our own lives. The role of our carers is to instill that self-worth, self-love in us throughout our formative years, to make that self-love, self-worth our base or foundational program. The more control we have over our own self-love and self-worth, the more we can access our ultimate potential. By staying present in your deep, slow breath while listening to this podcast, whilst embracing your humanness in your compassionate heart of acceptance, being your own sanctuary, in other words, you are engaging in the process of being your own source of self-love and self-worth. This is something you can keep developing as conscious awareness, regardless of your past or your present circumstances and conditions. Stay focused and keep listening. To varying degrees, as adults, we remain trapped in this limited and vulnerable childhood level of consciousness because of our fear-based dependencies and attachments, hence our confusion about how life works. We still think and act as though the world around us and the people in it have control over our own minds. By the time we are adults, we are potentially independent thinkers with our own awareness, but also with minds that are stacked full of pre-packaged habitual ways of thinking, conscious and unconscious, and much of which is in conflict with our own natural potential. The confusion that our minds are conditioned to are therefore constantly obscuring our awareness to varying degrees. As a result of not being aware of the direct causal link between thought and emotion, we don't see our own thoughts and its consequence because we are pushing away the uncomfortable emotion that is pointing to the thought. Instead, we end up experiencing our painful emotions like they are fire-breathing dragons rampaging through our minds when we least expect it, and think those emotions are being caused by the world around us. In reality, though, now as adults, our emotions are created by the ways we consciously or unconsciously think about and therefore react to the circumstances of the moment and the meanings we place or project onto that experience. The world around us is only triggering our habitual programs or conditioning that contain our mental confusion. It is our own habitual mental confusion, however, that is causing our emotional pain, resulting in the ways we habitually react to circumstances and conditions in our lives. We do not realize that our suffering is now basically caused by two thoughts. 1. I am not loved, believing that others are our prime source of love. And 2. I am not worthy, therefore rejecting ourselves and depriving ourselves of the love that is at the very core of our being. These misbeliefs, basically amounting to self-rejection, are at the core of all of our suffering. So, what is the solution? Here it is important that you center yourself in your breath once again and refocus, because I'm going to tell you the most important thing I can ever tell you, and getting this is the key that unlocks your full potential. We suffer because we remain largely unaware that we have our own internal source of love, independent from the rest of the world. We don't realize that our foundation of self-worth, resilience, confidence, connectedness comes from our own self-love. For so many of us, we don't actually know that we can love ourselves in this profound way. As I pointed out in my book and my previous podcasts, the only thing you need to do to qualify for this profound level of love is to exist. You exist, therefore you are already worthy. This statement confronts so much of our human conditioning, but be sure that every belief that you have that contradicts this statement disempowers you. In reality, no one owns your love but yourself. Experiencing love is experiencing the reality of our oneness with life as a universal consciousness. Experiencing unconditional love is experiencing in some way this oneness that you are with life. Even when someone else is loving you, they are, through the sanctuary of this love they are giving you, enabling your own heart to open, which connects you to the oneness with life that is your foundation of life. In combination to the love they are showing you, you are unconsciously experiencing the love that you are already plugged into, simply because you exist. When we are young children, our carers represent this unconditional love to us, which then teaches us how to love ourselves in this fundamental way, which, through this positive conditioning, then places us in the position of representing universal consciousness, oneness, unconditional love, in other words, to our own self. This self-love connects us without really realizing it in a profound way with the universal consciousness of life itself. We are all natural channels of universal love, because this is our true nature. We are getting this love directly from its ultimate and unlimited source, which makes us less dependent on the world around us for love, and therefore we feel less vulnerable. We can engage with the world more confidently, even courageously, because we are standing in our own internal independent foundation of love, no matter what is happening around us, no matter who is judging us by projecting their confusion onto us, no matter what unfavourable events or even tragedies befall us. No matter what happens, we can keep replenishing ourselves with our own internal source of love, facilitated by our own responsible self-love conditioning. This is resilience. This is the foundation of our independent self-worth and our deep sense of connectedness and inner peace. A small percentage of people have this power due to their favourable childhoods and childhood conditioning. Some also have it deeply in their own intuition, regardless of what their childhood experiences are. For the rest of us, we are able to construct this self-love, self-worth foundation with our own mindfulness practice. To take it further, the pursuit of spiritual enlightenment and the various levels of spiritual experience is achieved by consciously connecting on deeper levels to our oneness with life. We connect to the oneness of life by facing and connecting to our own vulnerable humanness, by being our own source of love. In this way, we are literally learning how to be love, which is the most powerful and sustainable way to experience love. It is the disconnection from ourselves that causes us to feel disconnected from life and therefore love. To stay conscious and to keep evolving your consciousness, you must connect to and reconnect to this truth over and over again for your entire life. Your worthiness, therefore, depends on nothing but your existence. It is the reality of your oneness with life. Nothing that has ever happened to you in this world, nothing anyone has ever said to you defines you beyond this point. You are already one with life. You have already arrived. In fact, you have never left. At no time can you be separate from this oneness with life as a universal consciousness that we feel and experience as unconditional love. But you can feel separate because you have come to believe that you are. As conscious awareness, you must realign to this ultimate truth of your being. You must then get on with aligning your confused mind and therefore your life to this truth. Those who do succeed in mastering themselves. This truth becomes your center of conscious awareness, your power of love and wisdom. That is the core of your being. That is the foundation for which you live every aspect of your life. Therefore, in order to gain mastery over your mind, you must learn how to skillfully be present with, manage and care for your emotional life, from the perspective of being your own source of unconditional love. In other words, unconditional self-acceptance and total personal responsibility to be the source of care and mentorship of your mind. When properly understood and handled, painful emotions are actually an important and great source of inner strength and wisdom. Emotions actually give your awareness the ability to see into your mind. It is your inner sight or insight into the nature and consequences of your thoughts. In reality, that fire-breathing dragon is your own inner child, your vulnerable self at any age, feeling frightened and alone, with the intensity of emotion that is felt by a powerless, vulnerable child. This child is needing your help to bring it back to love. You are the love your inner child mind needs, even though your mind at first only looks for this love out in the world around you. So let's have a look at how to put mindfulness into practice, using painful memories as an example, because learning how to be mindful whilst experiencing painful memories teaches us so much about being in a state of mindfulness at any time. Remember, this is about learning and growing. There is no magic pill. There is no "are we there yet?" When we are chasing the magic pill, we are running away from our own humanness, the very thing we are here to master. Even powerful near-death experiences and psychedelic experiences that can be so transformative simply tell us to keep facing ourselves and loving ourselves, and therefore keep evolving, which in turn teaches us how to love others unconditionally in a way that does not compromise ourselves. So keep breathing your deep, slow breath of conscious awareness that is embracing your humanness as best you can, with loving acceptance and compassion while listening to this podcast. When an activated painful memory is replaying through your mind-body, the intensity of the emotion triggers our mind-body into fight or flight, while at the same time causing us to think the memory is physically happening now. In the field of psychology, this is often referred to as a flashback. This is what's occurring with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Our mind-body thinks, reacts, as though we are the child in that memory, or whatever age and level of maturity that we were within that memory. We are literally pulled back in time, and suddenly we are that powerless, frightened child, but with adult reactions and defenses added to it. However, the emotions, thoughts and sensory perceptions that are experienced in these flashbacks are pure energy. They are not solid objects. They are not actual events that are happening now. They can only harm you if you believe they can, which in the moment is difficult not to do. If instead you step back and be the aware observer, reliving an activated painful memory can be like watching a scary movie, a movie of your memories, but from the safety of the armchair in the movie theatre. You can know it is not actually physically happening now, even though you can feel the dramatic impact of that triggered memory. In order to observe your mind, you first must consciously be aware of your mind. The commitment to pay attention to your emotions whilst accepting yourself unconditionally is how to initiate the awakening of your conscious awareness. Unconditional self-acceptance is a vital key, a fundamental law of consciousness that opens your heart and activates your awareness. It is fundamental to being able to face yourself in a safe, manageable, and inevitably comfortable and compassionate way. Unconditional self-acceptance is the antidote to self-rejection and all the confusion this deeply buried misbelief creates in our minds. Mindfulness is taking the art of meditation into your everyday activities. Mindfulness is teaching you how to hold your humanness by the hand throughout the day and how to be your own sanctuary and mentor. Meditation is the foundation of yoga, and a central feature of yoga, meditation, mindfulness is focusing your awareness on your breath. Focusing on your breath greatly empowers your ability to be the aware observer for three important reasons. Firstly, every breath you take is now, and this is where you need to center your awareness. Why is now so important? Because when it comes to managing your life, you can only act now. Everything else is just thinking, but the mind, without awareness, often can't tell the difference between acting and thinking. Because of its fears and desires and insecurities and lack of awareness, the mind gets lost in trying to control the past, such as with regret and resentment, or it is trying to control the future, such as with worry and anxiety. Our minds are often having imaginary conversations, even arguments, with people who are not present with us. The mind often thinks it knows things that it can't possibly know, such as precisely what someone else is thinking. The mind gets so lost in its memories and imagination. In other words, the mind is usually all over the place, trying to control things it has no control over, and all too often gets confused and suffers as a result. In reality, with this confused thinking, the mind is achieving nothing but burning up energy. It's like the mind thinks it's running down the road, but it's really just running on a treadmill. Focusing your awareness in the now, using your breath as an anchor to the now, reveals how your mind is pulling you out of the present moment and scattering your energy and focus, thus causing you stress and disempowering you. To be aware, you need to pull free of your mind and its confusions. For example, by focusing on my breath, I could learn to be aware during difficult memories of being bullied by an older brother and by boys at my school, whilst also being aware that my body was now sitting safely in a chair in my office. Even though I could feel all my mind's reactions to the memory of being a young teenager getting punched in the nose by my brother, I could know it was a memory and not the reality of the present moment. Focusing your awareness in the now by focusing on your breath is like pulling yourself out of a rushing river of confusion and onto the bank where you can observe the river of emotion without being swept away by it. I can recall being punched so hard in the nose by my brother that it broke my nose, remember the pain and the chaos, but also know I was actually safe in my office in that moment of remembering. By focusing my awareness on my breath, which is always now, I was able to stay centered in the present moment while knowing my mind was having a traumatic flashback. Instead of being dragged into that traumatic memory and suffering that experience all over again, I could be there for my inner child and take care of my inner child in that moment, harnessing my imagination to heal my own mind. I could also return to that memory as many times as I like, whilst learning to heal it and master it. So I achieved this with my ongoing mindfulness process at the time. My My brother did actually punch me in the nose and break it, as a part of him bullying me due to his own self-worth issues. However, even though he was bigger and older, I nevertheless was able to always rebel against him and most of the other bullies and retain an important level of my own power. As a result, not too much trauma was attached to individual experiences. It was more the overall experience of being bullied and controlled, and my parents not being able to adequately protect me from that, and how that impacted on my self-worth. But what if circumstances were different, and I carried a lot of trauma with that particular memory of being punched in the nose due to much more extensive violence, let's say? I may be aware that I am sitting in my office, but the impact of that memory could still be overwhelming. To add more power to your awareness, you can also control the rhythm of your breath in order to pull your body free of the fight or flight reactions. When you are in a state of fight or flight, such as with anxiety or anger, not only does your awareness and ability to reason become very limited, your breath also tends to be shallow and quick, and you feel tight and wound up. All manner of physiological reactions are being triggered due to your body being tied to your mind's blind fight or flight reactions. When focusing your awareness in the now via the breath while observing your mind, you can also practice slowing your breath down and deepening it, as we've been practicing through this podcast, which is how we tend to breathe when we are open, relaxed, and in control of the moment. When you slow down and deepen your breath in this way, you take control of your body's stress reactions that are caught up in your anxious mind and adding to the momentum of the fear. In a real way, this is like being the calm and capable parent, placing your reassuring hand on your inner child's shoulder, while letting your child know that you are there and your child is safe in your presence. With this mindful breathing, you are being calm, open, conscious awareness, gently embracing your reacting body. Now, with the power of your conscious aware breath, you can prevent your awareness as well as your body from reacting so much with the mind, which further empowers your ability to observe your mind. Therefore, your deeper, slower breath disengages your primal fight or flight reactions more effectively. Your mind's reactions are more efficiently redirected into your accepting and compassionate conscious awareness, rather than being seized by the blind primal reactions of fight or flight, where your fears and feelings of being out of control continue to be reinforced. By harnessing your breath in this way, you are pulling your body into the frequency of conscious awareness, which is above the fear and confusion of your reactive mind. This frequency of conscious awareness is known as the alpha frequency and is known as the optimal frequency for mastering the mind. It is essential to make this deeper, slower breath your new normal mode of breathing, which will help you to be mindful throughout the day, enabling you to be far more aware of any levels of stress that may be building up in your mind and body. So be in that deep, slow, open breath, whilst keeping your intention on listening to this podcast. Focusing on your body tension is another important focus of mindfulness. If you have been in a prolonged state of stress and anxiety, your body inevitably starts to show signs of this tension such as with headaches, stiff neck and shoulders, lower back pain and stomach pains, but not limited to these, of course. It is important to regard this physical pain the same as reactive emotions, your body sending you important messages. Therefore, tension in the body is a call to you as conscious awareness to stop, breathe, and spend time with your body's issues, paying attention to what it is telling you. Usually the message is that you are trying to control what is beyond your control, such as the future, the past, or other people, and you have been ignoring these warning signs. Self-rejection, low self-worth is usually the major causal factor. Listen to and stay tuned into your body, the same as your emotions, in order to keep track of what your negatively conditioned mind is doing to you. Your deep, slow breath is essential for staying connected to your body as with your mind. The longer you remain in a prolonged state of tension, the more entrenched and serious your physical symptoms can be. Lower back pain was a major issue for me, which began giving me trouble at the age of 17. With the help of my growing self-awareness and my ongoing emotional processing, my back-body balance was in far better shape at 50 than it was at 30. Issues such as various forms of arthritis, which I have in mild forms, would have taken over my body and likely disabled me, if not for my mindfulness practice. Your growing knowledge is another important factor of mindfulness. The act of pausing and taking deeper control of your breath when you feel your mind reacting becomes increasingly linked to and empowered by all the knowledge that you are learning about mindfulness, self-awareness, self-acceptance, self-care. This is where mindfulness really powers up. With practice, persistence, and experience, your new conscious attempts at self-care and constructive action forge new habitual synaptic pathways in your brain. These new positive thinking pathways become linked to the old confused pathways that are triggering your trapped emotional reactions. So when you react in the old way, the new self-care conditioning is also triggered, prompting you to be able to pause, breathe, and observe, which also instantly connects your awareness to all the knowledge and experience that you are gaining through your self-care mindfulness practice. With this new clarity, you can then identify the problematic thoughts with the knowing of how the old thinking just causes you more problems. As part of your growing knowledge and experience, a new, more constructive way of dealing with the situation is now part of your awareness. In that instance of the reaction, you now have a new choice of how to act. In time, a new constructive choice becomes the new habit, and you can see in that instance how the old way just does not make sense. So you are learning to identify the old reactions, but no longer identify with them. Self-acceptance care adds the power of love to your conscious awareness, observing self, which empowers your insight and ability to process the pain and confusion even more effectively. You are increasingly observing your mind's reactions from the perspective of unconditional love, enabling you to compassionately see your mind's confusions for what it is, misbeliefs about you not being worthy of love. With my growing conscious awareness, empowered by self-acceptance, self-love, I came to identify how I needed to be cared for in those memories of being bullied and unsupported, and how I became confused about my worth because of such experiences. I spent time processing and reimagining the memories, becoming my own parent, protecting and nurturing my inner child. Such processing also helped me to be compassionately aware of what was happening for my brother at the time, and that his confusion in my parents' inadequacies of just being human had nothing to do with my worth. As you practice mindfulness, you increasingly learn, as the aware, receptive, observing self, to differentiate your conscious awareness from the habitual and irrational thoughts that are causing you to suffer by the ways those thoughts feel in comparison to self-loving thoughts. Even when your reactions get the better of your awareness in that moment of the reaction, with self-acceptance, you can go back to that difficult moment later and review it in the same way. The insights that you gain from this process then become the knowledge and experience that further strengthens your ability to be the observer in the present moment, being able to hold steady while the mind is reacting. By not giving up, by persisting with the process of self-awareness, self-care, the strength of your awareness will simply keep growing. You will inevitably, step by step, gain increasing mastery of your mind. Every moment that once seemed a problem becomes an opportunity to grow your awareness. Therefore, you are able to detach from, observe, and then care for your reactive mind by observing and processing your emotions. So, there are 5 important factors to remember. 1. Commit your life to accepting yourself totally and taking full responsibility for the care and guardianship of your mind. This is right view, right intent from the Buddhist perspective, the 2 foundational steps of the Buddhist Eightfold Path. This brings ultimate power and perspective to your observing self, you as a conscious awareness. This approach opens your heart of love and strengthens and empowers your heart with increasing clarity. This is the path of love and wisdom, to realizing your true nature and being able to provide all that your human self needs to free it from suffering. 2. Center yourself in the now by focusing on your breath. 3. Make breathing slower and deeper your new normal. 4. Learn and practice all you can about mindfulness and self-awareness ongoing, and your new awareness will become increasingly present and in control in that moment your mind reacts. 5. It is not about getting it right. It is about getting on with it, having a go, learning from each experience and never giving up. If you do this, ongoing awakening, healing and growing, leading to an increasing awareness, inner peace and empowerment, will be your way of life. So that concludes this episode. Keep studying this podcast and get into my other podcasts. The Power of Love and Wisdom is within you. Your never give up persistence and commitment will awaken your power and ensure you will succeed. And don't forget my book, 5 Steps to Freedom, A Path to Inner Harmony and Personal Growth. Also, feel free to contact me by email if you have any comments or questions. Be the forever loving and compassionate guardian and parent to your own mind, and love will always warm your heart.